Welcome to the Barbell and Beyond podcast, where we talk to athletes, experts, and coaches about all things related to training and competing in powerlifting. We will bring you the insights and stories that will take your performance, training, and mindset to the next level.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Barbell and Beyond podcast. Today, I feel very privileged to have on the podcast one of our very own coaches, Emma Dixon. So Emma is actually the first coach that we brought on board with Barbell and Beyond back in 2022. So she's been with us for a number of years, and I think she is one of powerlifting's best kept secrets. She is such a phenomenal coach, and I am really excited to talk with Emma today so that more of you can get to know her backstory, where she's come from, why she is the phenomenal coach that she is. And I'm not the only one who thinks you're amazing, Emma. In preparation for this podcast, I may have emailed your coaching roster and asked them for things to share about you. And I was expecting a couple of replies, but the number of replies I got, I think pretty much your entire coaching roster emailed me back and told me how incredible you are to have as a coach. And some really common themes that came through were your attention to detail, how much you care, how personalized your coaching is, how you're able to individualize your program for what your athletes really, really need. And they feel so cared for and supported. And these are some of the incredible qualities that you have as a coach, some really amazing soft skills. And because I know your backstory, I think I understand where some of those things have come from and how you are the person that you are. And I would just love you to share that story with us today. I think before we go into that, though, maybe we tell people how we met. So tell us a little bit about how you got into powerlifting and how you came on board as a coach with Barbell and Beyond.
Yeah, so I think it was back in 2019. I decided to do a powerlifting comp down in Invercargill, and there was an email sent out asking if anyone would like any help with coming to the competition, meet day handling, preparation up into comp, all that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, yes, I must jump on that. And it was you, which was amazing. Such a true role model for so many women out there as well. So it was really quite cool to actually experience competition with proper structure compared to my first competition.
I was going to say, because you had done a competition before, you'd already competed. You were very well prepared. You were, from the very beginning, I could see that you were a well prepared athlete, dedicated. You had attention to detail. You cared a lot about your technique. So you showed up to a novice meet already having a really good foundation. What else did you experience as the difference between your first, I guess, club or gym meet for fun and then doing a formal novice with New Zealand powerlifting?
It was a lot more organized, for one, on both parts. So obviously the competition ran very, very smooth. And at both competitions, one thing they had in common was it was very supportive. I've never been to any meet that hasn't been supportive. It's always such a great environment to be in. And I think everyone is always very surprised at their first meet just how supportive it is. So that was one of the big things that they shared in common. But I think mainly just having the actual guidance of a coach made the world of difference. It's kind of like you can more or less turn your brain off for a lot of the things, and your coach is there to help you with that. And you can just really focus on your lifts on the platform. Everything else you can kind of, more or less not have to think too much about, which is so amazing. Having experienced having to think about all those things as well as, competing on the platform, it's a little bit like, terrifying. So
it's nice. I guess it's nice to just be able to be an athlete, especially when you're also a coach, to have your day where you're able to focus on being an athlete. And this is something I think is really interesting about you. A lot of coaches do build some of their reputation, their coaching reputation, on being a very, very good athlete. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about you have all the attributes of an elite athlete. Your mindset, your dedication to your externals, your preparation for training. I had the pleasure after that first comp of working with you for a couple more meet preparations. including your last meet where you were just incredible. You hit all PBs, you went 9 for 9. So you have this elite athlete ability, but you're not known for that. And there's a story behind that. And I guess I think this is a really, really cool story because it helps to understand why you are the coach that you are. You could have been an elite athlete, but can you tell us a little bit about your diagnosis and what it is that you manage on a day-to-day basis?
Yep. So when I was 5, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was definitely, it held me back a lot of the time, especially as a young kid. It was my knees and ankles that tended to affect me the most when I was younger. I was put on methotrexate and a couple of other medications as well. I seemed to have gone into remission about age 13, give or take, which was amazing. And then it came back, I think it was around 17 or 18, and we got it under manage again. I went back onto my medication and got it all under control. And that was kind of when I started getting into strength training a little bit more. Like I had started gymming around the age of 16, very lightly, more so just cardio, a little bit of weights here and there, not too much. And then it was, I think, my second flare up when I was 21, which was quite bad. I had an infection on my leg, which flared it up pretty intensely. And I couldn't walk, I couldn't get out of bed. So that was not very ideal. But it made me kind of take my training a lot more seriously. I started doing a lot of research on what can actually help, along with nutrition. Nutrition was probably one of the best things. My nutrition was never very tidy. It was, a lot of processed foods, lots of sugar, all of that kind of stuff. And I've, for the most part, cut it out. Apart from here and there when you want to actually, go out and have a nice social event or something like that. And that's absolutely fine. But it's more of the consistency around it that is the main thing, right? So a lot less sugar has been a massive, massive thing for keeping my inflammation under control. And with that kind of comes the processed foods. But strength training and treating my joints like muscles, if that makes sense. So working them through their full ranges of motion. Obviously not straight away. It was a very slow progression. I used to really struggle just kneeling on the ground because I had so much fluid in my knees that I couldn't actually compress the back together. So over time, doing things like ATG split squats, starting up on a high box, very slowly coming down so that now I can do them on the ground and getting full range of motion without your heel popping up and all that kind of stuff. I think the biggest thing is not getting too ahead of yourself and actually trust the process, go slow, but actually progress as well.
So you got into going to the gym to keep yourself healthy. You learned that you could move your joints the similar way to how we add progressive overload to muscles.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of your training, like when I first met you, you were more into power building.
Yeah.
Would that be the reason why? Is that sort of why you had that style of training, to manage your arthritis symptoms and still be able to train and still be able to move?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was squats were the ones I struggled with the most. And they are definitely behind all my other lifts, but they're slowly coming up. I feel like I'm a good year behind on squats and all my other lifts.
Why do you feel that is? What are the symptoms that come up for you when you train squats, for example? What do you experience? Because I think a lot of people don't really understand what rheumatoid arthritis is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with rheumatoid, basically your immune system, just to keep it very, very simple, it attacks the joints. So your cartilage can kind of wear down and everything it's quite painful. You have a lot of inflammation as well. Your overall immune system is compromised too. So you tend to get quite sick very often. But for me, it was definitely the bottom of the squat was the worst. So for depth was a massive problem for me for a very long time. I could not get anywhere near parallel at all. So it was trying to find variations that would still work for me. So before I was really into powerlifting, deadlifts were fine. So I got to build them up quite nicely because I didn't have the same, like a intense amount of flexion on the knees.
You had a great deadlift at that meet in Invercargill.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think it was best on the day, which was pretty cool.
It was indeed heaviest lift of the day with just beautiful technique, execution, everything. It was just so great. So I guess a lot of your initial training for yourself at a young age was about keeping yourself healthy. You had to really manage your externals in order to be, in order to essentially manage pain or reduce pain, reduce inflammation. And you're already having a ton of experience having to regress exercises and find modifications that work for you and your body. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So these are some of the skills that your athletes have loved telling me about. They're like, hey, Emma's amazing. She really understands. And I think it's because you really do understand. So you genuinely have this amazing desire to help people and meet them where they're at. And that includes a lot of attention to detail and being able to really genuinely individualize their program and find the right modifications and regressions for your athletes, which I think is just such an awesome skill set to have.
It's not very often you come across an athlete with no injuries or no previous injuries either. So it's kind of one of those things I do really appreciate having the experience if we're pulling positives out of, that kind of stuff, as I can apply it so well to other people, which I love doing.
And are you happy to talk a little bit, you had that recent meet where you went 9 for 9 and you had phenomenal results and strength progression was happening. And then you continued on with your training, but symptoms started to come back. It was a time where you had to make some tough decisions, pulling out of a meet because you were in a lot of pain and needing to protect your health. That's a really difficult thing to do as an athlete. When you work so hard for your lifts and you do so much work to manage your externals, can you tell us a little bit more about what that felt like and why you had to make that decision?
Yeah, so I was originally going to be competing in teams, which is not that far away now. I think it's about a week away. I'm now handling for the team, so that'd be awesome. I can still experience the whole competition, so that'd be awesome. But yeah, having to pull out, I think, is one of those things. I have in the past pushed through a meet and when I was experiencing a bit of pain, and it did not go that great. I ended up having to take a full year off powerlifting altogether afterwards, and I really don't want to take that step back. So I don't want to end up back on medication either. So it's one of those things that I just want to try and manage the best I can without having to do that. So I thought the best thing to do would be to pull out of the competition with plenty of notice so that I didn't let the team down closer to the event either. So it's just one of those things. You have to think of the long term, not now, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is fantastic long-term thinking. And I guess when we're coaching our athletes, I know when we coach our athletes, we want to apply the same long-term thinking, right? We want to have their long-term well-being in mind. It can be quite difficult. Sometimes athletes want quick results right then and there when we know it might be to a detriment. It might put them at risk of something that we shouldn't put them at risk for, or we might be squeezing out all their newbie gains. Yeah. How do you manage working with athletes? You have the same experience that you want your health and well-being for the long term. How do you work with athletes who want it right here, right now?
I think it's one of those things you have to have that hard conversation with them. Find best, obviously, over a call or in person if you can, rather than through an email, because I sometimes don't think they can quite grasp the importance behind it.
How much we care, right?
Yeah,
that we genuinely want what's best for them. And sometimes we can see the bigger picture because we're not in it, or, it's not our emotions. We can be a little bit more objective, maybe.
100%. I had an athlete not that long ago. She was originally signed up to do the meet that I just had another client compete in. And it was one of those things. She was the strongest she had ever been, and she started to get some nerve pains. So it was one of those things we were very unsure how to kind of go from there. So we got all the right help that we needed, and we made the tough decision to pull out. It wasn't impacting her lifts as such, but it was the after of training. So it was one of those things we just decided, look, let's put it in the back burner. Let's focus on what's in the future and just get you feeling 100% again. And then we'll build up to that again. You've been here now. You can totally get back there. But I think keeping that in mind yourself and as an athlete it's hard to do. But once you do it and you start to get better, it's the best thing you could ever do.
I think you and I have something a little bit in common there. Our wish for the athletes that we work for is to improve their quality of life.
Yes.
And their powerlifting and their lifting should support that, and their competing should support that.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've both, you have rheumatoid arthritis and I've had way too many knee operations, we know what it's like to be in chronic pain, to not be able to walk, to not have good quality of life. When you've had your quality of life taken away from you like that, you kind of realize like competing is the icing on the cake.
Yes.
But it's not everything, because if you're in pain day to day in your day-to-day life, that ain't worth it, right?
Nope, not at all.
And so I think there's something about that. For some athletes, competing is everything. And I do think it can be beneficial to work with a coach who can kind of see the bigger picture and say, actually, there will always be another competition. This isn't your last meet. This is just one option, and it's not the best option right now. There's always going to be another competition. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you had a couple of athletes compete recently who achieved just phenomenal results. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Sarah and Danielle?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So it was 2 days back to back at the gym that I work out of. So that was awesome.
Do you want to plug the gym where you work out of in person?
Ballarat. Yeah, Stronghold Ballarat. It's such an amazing space, very accepting. Probably one of the most accepting and comfortable gyms I've ever trained at. I've never felt more kind of at home, I guess, is the right way to say
it. That's so beautiful, because we're going to talk about gyms and more about gyms in a little bit. So the fact that you feel at home and it's a good fit for you and your values and the work that you want to do is just phenomenal. So both of your athletes also train there?
Yep. So they both don't actually train there, but I got them in for a few sessions to get comfortable with the meet gear and make sure that they feel good, because it does feel different, as we know. So Sarah did amazing. She's been managing a buttload of injuries over the years. So working around rehab and all of that kind of stuff, we've just tried to make sure that she's had the most pain-free experience that she could leading up to a meet. So I actually met her last year at the novice comp at Stronghold, and I was just helping out the back, and I ended up kind of meet day handling her and one of her friends. And they had, I just knew from then, I was like, I would love to work with you. You're amazing. She said that she was going in for a surgery to repair her ab separation. So she said, but I will be in contact with you once I've recovered from that. And she did, which was amazing. So I worked her up towards this competition, and we started very, very conservative. So I'm talking like well below 5 RP lifts. We started on like 50, 60 kg deadlifts, making sure that she kind of had no pain. I remember her saying to me, are you sure this is very, very light and it's feeling very easy? And I was like, trust me. But we got her up, and she ended up on her squat, she got 120. And it was a 12.5 kg comp PB. And this is something we had a lot of trouble with. Her squats was one of the main areas she was getting a lot of pain. And her bar path, it turned out being a lot of inefficient movements throughout her lift. So we kind of worked together to make it the most optimal for her. So 12.5 kg PB on her squats. She got a 75 kg bench, which is insane. 5 kg comp PB for her there, and then her deadlift was 120, which is a 2.5 kg comp PB. So deadlifts towards the end there became a little bit touch and go, so we decided to just hold them back that little bit, but she still managed PB on the day, so it was really cool.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, that's a 20 kilo PB total overall, and she went 9 for 9 attempts.
Yes, she did.
And it's just a phenomenal outcome. She was one of the athletes who sent in some very lovely words about you. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail soon. And the other athlete you had competing was Danielle.
Yeah, Danielle, it was her first competition, which was awesome. So I actually held a workshop at the last gym that I worked at It was a squat, bench, deadlift, because I thought, oh, there's not that much of this at this gym. Let's kind of start introducing it. And I had a full roster. So I only opened it up to 15 people and it was booked out. So I was super happy with that. And then she approached me about maybe 4 or 5 months after the workshop. And she was like, Emma, I really want to be a competitive powerlifter. She's like, I am a very competitive person and I really, really want to do this. I was like, you've sold me. Let's go. So this novice comp was coming up and I was like, this is perfect. Like, let's do this. You don't have to travel far, let's do that. She has got such a positive energy. And she was like one of the most friendliest people at the comp. She was going up to everyone. She hugged a few after their first attempts and all that kind of. It was just the best thing ever. And she was so nervous, but she did amazing. So she got 82.5 on her squat. So a little bit of behind the scenes for her with that. When she came to me, she was squatting the bar and could not get very deep at all. Not deep at all. And then we slowly worked on a bit of range of motion outside of the squat and making better movement patterns, and then slowly built that up. And she ended up with a 2.5 training PB, which was great. And she's definitely got much more left in the tank as well. It's a lot of confidence for her. Her bench, she did actually get 52.5 kgs on her third attempt, but it was red lighted as it did make a little bit of downwards motion. But it was the most insane grind I've ever seen someone work for. But prior to that, she got 47.5, which was still a 2.5 kg PB, which was amazing. And then 115 on her deadlift, which she had actually failed a couple of weeks prior to competing because, bless her, a woman came up to her in a gym that she'd never been to before because she was working away, and she kind of got in her head a little bit. And so she started overthinking the lift and could not get it up. So she was doing really, really well on the day. I was like, look, you've got such a good positive, atmosphere around you. Let's just go for it. I bet you've got it. It lifted with ease, man. It was insane. It was so good. And she ended up with 8 out of 9 lifts as well, which was so cool.
Which was awesome. And the strength was there on the third lift. It was more of a technicality. So
yes. Yep.
8 from 9 official attempts, but a victory on that third bench press to be able to grind it up like that. And it sounds like a really epic and very, very supportive environment, which is fantastic. So I guess now maybe a good time to talk about the fact that you've recently changed gyms. And I think this is really impressive for a number of reasons. So for quite a while, you and I have been working on your coaching business, both in person and online. And you had done super well. So for context, Emma moved from New Zealand. Then she went and traveled and did online coaching in Thailand. And then she settled in Australia and rebuilt her entire in-person PT business from the ground up to having a full coaching roster. However, the gym that you had chosen to work at, there was a mismatch between core values and what you truly believe in. And so Emma took the ethical stance to leave that gym despite all the hard work that she'd put in building her client roster and start up somewhere else, because there was a really strong conflict of your coaching ethos and values. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I won't get into the nitty-gritties, but it was more so, things that would say that they're scientifically proven that aren't putting women on very, very low calorie diets for what they should be, but the mix of strength training along with these low calorie diets, like I'm not too sure what these people are expecting. And you'd get people coming up to you bawling their eyes out, like, I've been doing everything that this is telling me to do. I'm losing weight, but I feel like crap. My strength has decreased, and I genuinely feel like I'm going to have a meltdown every other day. And I'm like, well, that is not something that should be promoted in any way, shape, or form to anyone. There's just no.
For context, I'll just let our listeners know, Emma has a qualification in sports nutrition. So she's very well educated on what the science is and what evidence-based practice is. And the gym, and we won't go into details, but it was a women's only gym, and they were promoting very, very low calorie diets and basically encouraging their membership to just focus on weight loss, extreme weight loss at that, extreme caloric restriction. So this is, I guess, unfortunately, something that we still see in the fitness industry. I would say in terms of nutrition coaching, the majority of people still come to us for wanting to lose weight and wanting to be smaller. That's probably one of the primary drivers still for nutrition. What do you think are the hard rocks or the fundamentals of good nutrition for someone to be healthy, their healthiest and their strongest? What are some of the fundamentals?
Eating enough is the biggest one. So like a lot of people talk, obviously, eating in a calorie deficit. Yes, we need that to lose weight, but we don't want to go to the extreme side of that because, you're just going to end up having low energy availability, and you're going to, the worst part of that is you feel like absolute crap, and you should not feel like crap during this process. We want to focus on building a stronger foundation so you're good mentally and physically, and you feel like you're actually progressing. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't eat enough protein or fiber, and those are the two main drivers that we need to be focusing on. And I think a lot of people demonize carbohydrates when they really shouldn't be. They're the main thing that I get a lot of people to focus on, other than obviously your protein, but for sports nutrition, like it's a massive, massive part of it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that you can pretty much eat most things. You can eat everything. It's just the moderation that you've got to focus on. And I think one problem that a lot of people do end up doing is doing the all or nothing mindset, where they just go really hard, really fast and they might have been averaging, 2,500 calories a week or whatever it is a day over the week. But then they go into this really extreme thing where they're not even eating 1,000 calories. And yes, you will lose weight. I'm not saying that you're not going to, because you kind of do. But
what kind of weight do you lose? Exactly?
Muscle. You've got a lot of water weight that you're losing as well. You might lose a little bit of body fat, but most of it's coming from those two other places, unfortunately. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
So you and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about the difference between nutrition coaching and offering a meal plan. Yeah. And I guess that's one of the things that this gym was doing, was giving a one size fits all, the same macros, calories, meal plan for everybody. Yep. And that's quite different to what we do in our nutrition coaching. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what we try to do when we work with a nutrition athlete?
Yeah, so we look at building habits and long-lasting habits. So I've had a lot of people over the years ask me for meal plans, and one I can't. But it's one of those things that even if I could, I don't want to. We'll
tell the listeners why you can't. It's not that she's not capable. In Australia, the industry is quite regulated, and meal plans are more the domain of registered dietitians.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, potentially clinical nutritionists or dietitians. But for a nutrition coach or for sports nutrition, evidence-based and best practice is normally to work with the athlete and help them design meals that are healthier based on, more of their habits that they already have, and sort of a little bit more similar to what they're already doing, but slowly and progressively building habits and doing things a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's working on those small things. Like, you don't overhaul everything and go, right, you got this, and this to work on. Yes, they probably do, but you need to start with the smallest, easiest thing that can actually make it seem so achievable that they, can do the rest of it.
We talk about that a lot too, don't we? About helping our athletes achieve wins, like making sure our athletes feel like they're getting small wins and making progress and building habit after habit until it actually feels quite easy.
Yes. Absolutely.
So it's quite interesting. You moved to your new gym, which has a much better fit and feel. You mentioned that it feels like home. Yeah. And I guess we're leading into one of your main client populations is women who are in perimenopause. Yeah. We're going to talk about the perimenopause transition and how a lot of your athletes who resonate with you are in that life transition. and there is a lot of crossover with things that we've spoken about already. But we've also talked about the message for younger women, so women in their late teens, 20s, 30s, and the fact that strength training, like, we're so excited about young women lifting weights and fueling properly because they have this opportunity to build as much muscle as they can, to lay solid foundations in terms of their bone health, and to build these really lifelong, amazing habits. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit before we enter into perimenopause, where it's not too late. You still can do those things, and they're hugely helpful and beneficial. But what would you say to someone your age, to young women getting into strength training? Why?
It sets you up for life, I think, is the easiest way you can kind of put it. I don't like, I always think if I never got into strength training, you know, the pains that I get now with my rheumatoid, how would they feel if I didn't do that? I don't even want to know. I wouldn't wish to know. And it's just one of those things, I think, even especially as someone quite young who doesn't have a lot of pains, does not mean you're not going to get them later on. So why not set yourself up to be able to handle that so well? You really have to invest this time and energy into yourself now, so that when you do, you know, set yourself up to have kids, go through those kind of later stages in life, it's a lot smoother than having to just start doing it then. And not saying that you can't, because any time is a good time. But I think the earlier you start, it's obviously the better.
Yeah, when's the best time to start? Now. But if you can start earlier, definitely better. And I think when I was your age, which makes me feel really old, but diet culture was everywhere. It was all about being as light and as thin and as skinny as you could be. And yes, some women were lifting weights, but not many. At my first couple of powerlifting competitions, it was rare to see a female athlete. There might be one, maybe two, maybe three.
Yeah.
Is it different now? I mean, you're more in touch with people your age. Like, what is the culture now? Is it okay? Is it promoted to be in the gym, strength training, building muscle, taking up space?
Oh, 100%. I was having this conversation actually with one of the other female trainers at Stronghold the other day, and myself, herself, and another woman were all training in the powerlifting area. And she was saying, look at the generations, like, it's amazing. Like, I'm 24, she's 40, early 40s. And then this other woman was 77. And it was just so amazing. Like, we were both deadlifting and the other woman was squatting. And it was just like, this is so cool. And most mornings, it's really, really cool to see at the gym space, like, there's at least, 10, 15 women training. And it's like, this is awesome. And this is a powerlifting and strongman gym. Like, it's just fantastic.
That is awesome. And to see strength at all ages.
I know. It's so cool.
You're never too old. You're never too young. You're never too old.
Nope.
So let's talk a little bit about perimenopause, the age group that I think potentially, due to some of your experience and your empathy, a lot of clients are drawn to you to work with you during this menopause transition. We know that menopause transition can start as early as your 30s. Yes. And it can last a long time. It could be a 10-year transition. So typically people enter perimenopause in their 40s, but it can start as early as your 30s, and it's a fairly long transition. It's not like a year, boom, you're done. It can be, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's very individual, and there are so many symptoms. And the ones that I want to bring some attention to have similarities to your rheumatoid arthritis, which can feel that inflammation, that joint pain. I think there are literally hundreds of symptoms. The other stats that I will talk about today, it is the period of time in a woman's life where they're most at risk of suicide. So mental illness, risk of suicide, relationship and marriage breakdowns. And I've recently been talking to another coach about this, who's preparing a guide for how to help women through this transition, not just for the women themselves to understand the physiology, but also for the important people in their lives, their husbands, partners, support people, coaches, to help support a woman through this transition. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you support athletes going through perimenopause transition?
Yeah, I honestly think the biggest thing is listening to them, listening to what they have to say and holding space for that as well. Not just brushing it off and being like, oh, you're fine, just suck it up and train anyway. That's not how it works. You do have to adapt and adjust. And it might be small things like, for a lot of my clients, I will have like the bare minimum for them to work through, as opposed to, because sometimes there are small things you can do to make yourself feel better. Like it'll be literally just making sure you go outside every day. Little things like that, to just, because it is very easy to kind of retract and just go, no, not doing that. But working on making your body feel better as opposed to giving into it and it feels worse. But also giving yourself the space and time away from certain things that you need to do. If that's getting away from the gym, go away from the gym, go for a walk instead, just do some mobility at home. It doesn't have to be, you have to go in and do this. Just, I think, getting a little bit of understanding, or a lot of understanding actually, on how your body feels, how it reacts to certain things as well, and just learning, because you're almost, going through puberty again, but in reverse. So it's one of those things, you have to learn your body and just see how it reacts to different things, because it's going to change.
It's a really interesting age group, because a lot of women in perimenopause, they're caregiving. And they could be caregiving, looking after their children. They could be caregiving, looking after aging parents. They're also likely working. And I see this sort of common theme that they're juggling everything, doing everything, and very highly stressed. Yeah. And so I think what you've said is really lovely, just to take some time out and not put too much pressure, focus on what feels good, tuning into their bodies. If it makes more sense to go for a walk or do some recovery or gentle exercise, as opposed to, those things in the context of everything that woman has going on, I think is really beautiful. When my other colleague coach did this poll, the feedback was that over 70% of women didn't feel like they had any support through this transition. That's the vast majority felt they were unsupported. And I think in this day and age, we think that our medical system has caught up, and then you can go and talk to your GP and get all the help that you need. But we hear stories every single day that that's not the case. And so I think as a coach, you have this unique position where you probably have more contact, more regular contact, and more in-depth conversations with your athlete than maybe they even have with their their close, their friend group or other people in their life. So you have this opportunity to have these touch points with them frequently to help them feel supported.
Yes. And honestly, I think that a lot of the people that I've worked with in the past, once they've opened up to me and they feel comfortable to open up to me, that's when their progress actually starts to go in a really, really great direction, because they're not holding anything back. They're giving you exactly how they feel, and they have a safe space to actually tell you exactly where they're mentally at, where they're physically at, without feeling judged. And that is honestly, that is what you can focus on to move forward.
Should we talk a little bit about how nutrition and exercise can support a woman through perimenopause transition? What are some of the main things that you see in terms of nutrition or in terms of training?
Mm-hmm. So the fad diets tend to make a return, unfortunately. So it's one of those things, again, to make sure that you're eating enough, really prioritizing protein and fiber, because again, they're not targets that a lot of people end up actually meeting. Not demonizing any food. Just remember, you can actually enjoy a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't have to be very, very restrictive. So enough protein, enough fiber. Strength training is going to be legendary. So your bone density tends to decrease over time as well, especially without,
estrogen.
Yes. So it's one of those things that it's going to be so important for your longevity as well, and putting enough muscle on your body too. And I mean, it can help reduce, risk of getting diabetes. Mental clarity is massive. The list is kind of, it doesn't end.
So if we sort of tidy up the resistance training side of things, it can definitely improve all health markers.
Yeah.
It can support weight bearing in terms of building bone density alongside nutritional things like making sure they have enough omegas, magnesium, things like that, calcium. And you mentioned a little bit about mental clarity, that mind-body connection.
Yeah.
Just to circle back at something you said at the start that's still on my mind. You said the fad diets come back. And I was thinking they do. And the reason they do is because the change in hormones and the way the body responds to cortisol, women start to put on weight in this transition, especially around the midsection, when they tell us, they quite clearly tell us they are doing the same amount of exercise and eating similar foods. And they're like, why am I holding on to fat? Why is this happening to my body?
Yeah. Yep.
But the same principles apply. Eating healthy,
100%.
Not cutting out entire food groups, using protein to support energy levels and to help keep mood as stable as possible, blood sugar levels and moods as stable as possible. Yeah.
No, I think one of those other things as well is when women tend to go through menopause, the body feels like crap, right? So you do, although you might be exercising the same amount, you do tend to move less throughout the day as well, which is a massive driver for, our overall energy expenditure, which can pop you into a slight surplus along with all the other stuff as well. So it's one of those things that, you're kind of, if you don't know that you're going through this change, it makes it impossible to know where to start.
Thinking back to recent events, we've just had masters, age group nationals, including juniors, sub-juniors, and masters athletes. And so in powerlifting, there's this incredible opportunity for women to be encouraged to strength train, and they can participate in a sport. And there are so many masters age categories, which is just phenomenal. It's something that you can use to help motivate and focus your training, so that you're able to do really great things for your health and your longevity and this transition while enjoying a sport. So that's pretty cool, hey?
Oh, it's amazing. And I mean, I've talked to a couple of older women in the gym who are in their 60s, 70s, that kind of thing. They only started training within the last 5 years. Like, it's amazing. And the strength that they're getting is insane, and their quality of life has just increased. So there really is, it's not too late. If you've actually done nothing, like no sports, no nothing, but you want to get stronger and you want that like goal setting of, the competition side of things, it's such an amazing, you don't even have to compete though, is the thing. It's just getting in amongst it. Go and have a watch of some of the events as well and actually experience how supportive the environment is, I think is really cool.
Circling back to your in-person coaching. So you've got a couple of things coming up, including some workshops. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your in-person workshops that you're planning?
Yep. So I wanted to do 2 different kind of workshops. One being a barbell basics. So people who, they've been coming to the gym, they've seen the barbells in the back corner and they're like, don't know if I really want to touch those without knowing what I'm doing. So I think this could be a really great opportunity for them to, be surrounded by like-minded people that haven't had much experience around that and start to build some confidence around that. But then also having a part 2, that if anyone would like to from that workshop move into the next one, or more experienced lifters, I really want to focus on maximizing efficient lifting. So that can be, there's so many tiny little things you can do to your lifts to make them feel so much stronger and smoother that I think a lot of people overlook. And sometimes it's small things like a lot of the time people might struggle with like a lockout on a deadlift. Sometimes it's not actually that area, it's down the bottom. So you need to look for those certain little things. It's not, sometimes the obvious answer. But another big thing, which I've been talking a lot about with my athletes and in-person clients lately, has been actually breathing and bracing correctly. I ended up sending out a couple of videos for clients to watch. I'm like, please just watch this, and so that you're prepared for this next session, so that we can kind of run through this a little bit more in depth, and learning how to actually, do 360 breathing and activating your TVA properly. So your transverse abdominal muscles, which are your really, really deep muscles, So it's one of those things that I think is also really overlooked, especially in more advanced lifters. They tend to kind of come back, and that's when they tend to get a little bit of a niggle here and there surrounding, because they're not actually breathing and bracing properly. And it's such a simple thing in theory.
Yep. So being able to show people and explain it in person, and being able to personalize the cues to them, and all those good things. In terms of bracing and, core activation and having your core canister essentially work the way that it should, we also see a host of pelvic floor symptoms. So it can be one contributor to a niggle or a tweak or something like that, but we also see pelvic floor issues in female lifters, which the myth is that only happens after you've had a baby. This is not true. We see pelvic floor issues in young athletes who haven't been taught how to breathe and brace correctly. And we see it worsening significantly in perimenopause. So again, this is one of those things that the earlier we can catch it for younger lifters, there are so many things that we can troubleshoot and show you and teach you, so that you're activating your core and bracing correctly, and not necessarily experiencing pelvic floor symptoms. There's so much that you can do. Sometimes I just want to tell a lifter, like, hey, do you realize that we could try like 20 things that would make your life easier and you not to have to, deal with this. We certainly don't want to make a lifter feel embarrassed or ashamed. It's not about that at all. It's always the lifter's choice if they want to troubleshoot some of these things. But I think as coaches, we're like, it would be really, we'd love to help you if you would give us that opportunity, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
There's some really cool content that's coming up in your workshops. How can people find out more about attending your workshops? Can you tell us where they will be and give us a rough time frame if the date hasn't been confirmed yet?
Yeah, so the date has not been confirmed, but I'm thinking within the next couple of months, and I will be posting about it on my Instagram. So you can.
What's your Instagram handle, Emma?
That's a great question. It's Emma _Barbell and Beyond.
You can also email, same email address, emma@barballandbeyond.online. And where are you based?
Stronghold in Ballarat. So it's just a wee way out from Melbourne. So it's not too far of a travel if you ever do want to travel down from Melbourne. But yeah, I would like to go over a whole heap of things. And it will become very, very clear as to what each workshop has involved as well, which I will pop up in the near future.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing all the details. Emma, I'll wrap up with some really amazing feedback. I've just picked one. We've got so many here. I asked ChatGPT to synthesize it to have some main points to say about you, but one of the ones that stood out for me, I'll read it out. Emma's attention to detail is what sets her apart. She gives detailed cues and feedback to help me get the most out of every session and every exercise. Her programming is creative with effective regressions, allowing me to make meaningful progress despite my injuries. Ultimately, I just love Emma's approach. She's smart, detailed, effective, dedicated. I cannot speak of her highly enough.
Wow. It's very, very nice. She's awesome.
Is there anything you feel that we haven't talked about today that you'd like to cover? Or if not, maybe leave us with some closing remarks about your coaching philosophy and why you do what you do.
I just really like to help people. I think when you realize, you can have someone to back you up in your corner and help you learn more about yourself and about, strength training in general, it really does take the guesswork out of it. And just don't let yourself hold you back. Give everything that you can. And I think the biggest thing is actually finding a coach that you get along with, but can also follow through with what you need. So not just one or the other.
Both. Yeah, that's amazing. We are so lucky to have you as part of our Barbell and Beyond coaching team. You're just such an epic and valued member of our team. I love our collaborations. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And just a reminder, if anyone's interested in working with Emma, you can find her at Stronghold Ballarat for in-person training, or she works with a number of athletes online. She is Emma_Barbell and Beyond, or Emma at barbellandbeyond.online. And just thank you again for being on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For the highest quality, personalized online coaching that will see you achieving your best powerlifting results, book a call with one of our expert coaches at Barbell and Beyond. We specialize in competition prep, nutrition for powerlifting, and helping you develop an elite athlete mindset. All of that and more can be found over at barbellandbeyond.online.